Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. My name's Nick Park, and I'm teaching a series of lessons called The Biblical Game of Thrones, looking at the kings of Israel and Judah and seeing how they were conniving and conspiring, and yet God still brought his purposes to pass despite all of the very human shenanigans and activity that were taking place. Now, we've been talking a lot about the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes headquartered in Samaria, because they had one king after another and they got wicked, more and more wicked. And yet in all that time, the southern kingdom of Judah, based in Jerusalem, was actually prospering and being blessed because they had two kings who each reigned for a long time. There was King Asa, who had reigned for 41 years, and then there was his son Jehoshaphat, who reigned for another 25 years. And they were both good kings. And so for 66 years, the southern kingdom, in contrast to all the idolatry and the murder and the stuff that was going on in the north, the southern king had good leadership. Sadly, that came to an end with the next king, Jehoram, who was the son of Jehoshaphat. He was a bad king. He reigned for 8 years, 4 years alongside his father. Perhaps his father was trying to mentor him and try and help him to be a better king. Well, if that was the point of it, it didn't work, because he reigned on 4 years after his father died. And he certainly shows us that holiness is not hereditary. Jehoram married Athaliah. She was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. I mean, the worst mother and father-in-law you could ever join yourselves to. And also Jehoram, he murdered his 6 brothers to make sure that he was the undisputed claimant to the throne. And 2 Kings chapter 8 sums him up in this way. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel as the house of Ahab had done. For he married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, for the sake of his servant David, the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah. He had promised to maintain a lamp for David and his descendants forever. Now, Jehoram was unsuccessful militarily. He managed to lose territory that had belonged to Judah. And eventually, he was condemned by Elijah for idolatry. And that is prophetic, not just because Elijah was a prophet, but because Elijah actually died before Jehoram came to the throne. And yet Elijah, before his death, wrote a letter for the king that was to come. Because while Jehoram's wickedness might have been a surprise if his father could have lived to see it, it was not a surprise to God. God knows what is in the hearts of men. And so Elijah actually wrote a letter before he died that was then, after his death, delivered to King Jehoram. And this letter told him that he was going to suffer an incurable bowel disease and that his palace would be ransacked. And that was what happened. Jehoram got sick with a dreadful bowel disease. We're told that eventually his bowels just fell out from inside of him. We're also told that he was attacked by the Philistines and the Arabs, people who would normally never have been able to triumph over the Jewish people. But they were able to because this nation was weakened by Jehoram's sin and idolatry. And all but one of his sons was killed. And 2 Chronicles chapter 21 sums up his reign in these depressing words. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. Jehoram shows us this. He shows us that you can have all the advantages of godly parents, godly grandparents, every opportunity put into your hands, but you are still responsible for the decisions that you make. And if you choose to make poor decisions, then all the holiness of your father, your grandfather, or whatever else will not help you. But it shows us something else as well. The fact that Elijah had sent this letter to him even before Jehoram came to the throne shows that God is not taken by surprise. That even when we see evil prospering, even when we see dreadful things happening, God is not taken by surprise. And God still had a plan for his people that would go down through these kings, and eventually a royal king, a real king, the son of David, would come, and he would be the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, and Lord of Lords. So despite all the sin of some of these kings, God was still in control. God knew what was going to happen, and God still prepared his people for that day. I pray that today, whatever's going on in your life, you will know God's overarching care for you, and that he has a plan for you that is a plan for good and not for evil, in Jesus' name. And I'd invite you to join us again next time for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.